Oh no. He brought his son with him. He's got his child with him.
Lots of the men on To Catch a Predator brought things to the Sting House. From candy, to cheeseburgers, sweat stains, to hard lemonade and fishing gear.
I was going fishing.
It sounds like what you were fishing for was sex with a 12-year-old girl is what you were fishing for.
Got him!
There was no shortage of goods being brought into pursuit of felony charges, but only one man brought his son. In my opinion, he is the worst TCAP predator of all, and that man is Clifford Eric Wallach.
He's getting out of the car.
But what happens here in Florida shocks us all.
Today, his life is a complete mess, but just wait until you hear about the drastic actions he claims Perverted Justice forced him to do 15 years after the sting ended in 2021.
Please give me my son, please. Can we please have my son, please?
I present this unsung zero, introduced during the Fort Myers sting on May 17, 2006. He couldn't find a sitter, flushed his life down Twitter when he met Chris Hansen and this future VP at Twitter. Let's talk about Clifford Wallach, unsung zero, number 5.
He's a 40-year-old married man, Clifford Wallach, screen name PhotoFix. He's here to meet a boy who told him online he was 14.
Cliff and the decoy start chatting at 2:24 p.m. At 3:57 p.m., he pulled up to the Dateline Sting House. That means it only took 93 minutes from first contact before he was ultimately arrested and bitching about his hands.
I can't feel my hands, please.
Man, f*** your hands. That means in less time than it would have taken to watch Big Mama House 2 on HBO, Clifford would make a decision that still impacts his life almost 20 years later. An even worse decision than whoever greenlit Big Mama House 2. In an instant, he lost his child, his career, and his freedom, but he blamed it all on the same wife who would later have another child with him.
He gets out and goes to the rear passenger side, and we think maybe he's going to get beer, pizza, stuff that we see these guys bring all the time. Instead, he grabs the hand of his 5-year-old son and leads him out of the car and up the driveway.
To truly appreciate what Cliff did, let's look at some of the most rarely accomplished feats in human history. To date, just a little over 6,000 people have reached the peak of Mount Everest, and only 622 humans have left our atmosphere and ventured into space. Only a little over 200 men made their way to a Dateline Sting House. To take it a step further, there are as many dead bodies littering Mount Everest right now than there were total men who were ever arrested on the show. Think about that. You were 3 times more likely to reach space in your lifetime than you were to star in To Catch a Predator. The men from this show were already in extremely rare company.
He's one of these guys who had a very short online chat, but then on the phone is graphic about what he wants to do. Apparently, the mother of the child, his wife, was working that day. He was in charge of the child and figured he'd just bring him along.
But even in this small pool of primetime pedos, there could only be one Michael Jordan, Tom Brady, or Ricky Wild Thing Vaughn. Sorry, I don't watch baseball.
Well, actually, I don't even watch baseball.
Cliff's chat log was minuscule because he didn't want to put his perversions in text. He was extremely careful, like a seasoned pro. Then he got on the phone with future VP of Trust and Safety for Twitter, Del Harvey, and threw all that precaution right out the window when FOMO Dick got the best of it.
Del from Perverted Justice, posing as the boy, talks to PhotoFix on the phone.
He said, I like oral all aspects. I said, giving or receiving. He said, both. I said, cool. He said, you up for that? I said, sure.
The actual conversation between Clifford and the decoy lasted about as long as an episode of Full House. And just like an episode of Full House, there was nothing funny going on here.
Nothing funny going on here.
Nothing funny going on.
No.
Clifford made his sexual intentions clear, but he never bothered to tell the decoy he would be bringing along his son. Why was he so comfortable with this? Have you been around a 5-year-old? They overhear everything and have ridiculous recall. Was this something Clifford did regularly? Nobody had seen anything like it at the Sting House before, but he was so casual, like it was the most normal thing in the world to bring along his child.
Coming in the back door.
Holding his son's hand, the 40-year-old walks into the house.
What you got?
Because we don't want to scare the little boy, we immediately tell the man what's going on.
I gotta tell you something, and I'm gonna tell you just straight up right now. I'm Chris Hansen with Dateline NBC.
Okay.
We're doing a story on adults eating children, and since you have your child here, I'm not going to pursue this.
Okay.
But I think you know what you were doing here, don't you?
No, I was just doing the thing with lunch.
Take a boy out to lunch you met on the internet.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
My point is, because your child is here, I think it'd be best if you just went ahead and left.
Yeah, I agree. I never got to this again.
Clifford doesn't know what's going on, but he wants to get away from this house as fast as humanly possible.
Since the police know the man has his son with him,
Sir, right there. You come here. You come here. Let go of the child.
These are their final moments together as father and son. They would not see each other again, and the moment was captured by a Dateline camera.
As gently as the female officer scooped him up, he still had to see his father get arrested.
Please give me my son, please. Can we please have my son, please?
He's begging for his son, but what he really wants is a rewind button to go back 2 hours and stop himself from chatting with the decoy. If his kid was a priority, he wouldn't have brought him along to feed his felonious desires.
I didn't do nothing wrong. I was only coming to take somebody to lunch. I can't feel my hands, please.
Where he's about to go, his hands will be the least of his worries. It's common knowledge how they treat predators behind bars. So what kind of treatment do you think Wallach received once people learned exactly what he did? In 2020, he had this to say about his experience. Prison was a nightmare. Being abused by the DOC police was worse than the abuse I took from other inmates. Not only was I entrapped, but since this was done by a vigilante group in Dateline NBC, it was run over and over again, especially during my trial. They kept moving me from camp to camp until finally I was able to be placed at a protective custody camp.
Based upon his interview with police, the chat log and everything else, it doesn't seem like he was going to involve the child in any sex act. It seemed like he was going to set the kid up in a room with a DVD and go do whatever he was going to do with this 14-year-old in another location of the house.
Imagine the call his wife got at work that day. She learned her husband was not just trying to cheat, but he brought her son along on a date. And to top it off, the person he went to meet was 14 years old. Having it all captured for a national TV audience, that was just icing on the cake.
the police contact the boy's mother at work, tell her what's going on, and she comes and gets him.
You want to get a drink? Yeah?
Meanwhile, the dad is taken to jail, photographed and put behind bars.
For 99.99% of people, this moment would warrant an instant divorce, no questions asked. The betrayal, the public shame, the guilt, it would be endless. But Cliff's wife disagreed. Not only would she stand by her man, but she walked away from her duties as a parent when Clifford lost his parental rights. She willingly gave up custody of her son to relatives so she could stay with her husband. That kid deserved better, and I'm hoping he got it. On Chris Hansen's Predators I've Caught podcast, he discusses how Wallach blamed his wife for the reason he sought out a child in the first place.
Wallach actually blames his wife, the woman who's working at a high-end retail store an hour away. He blames his wife because she, he says, in the interrogation, won't have oral sex with him. So he's got to drive across town and try to hook up with a 14-year-old boy, or someone he thinks is a 14-year-old boy.
Clifford made the decision to go to trial by jury rather than enter a plea of guilty. In court, Wallach claimed he had fantasies about younger-looking men and that he was taking the teenage boy and his son to McDonald's. The jury was asked, is it illegal to have a fantasy? Luckily, the jury saw through this bullshit, and Wallach was sentenced to 5 years in prison for attempted lewd and lascivious battery. He also received 10 years probation and lifetime registration as an RSO. He was released February 9th, 2012, and his wife was dutifully waiting for him. At 49 years old, the couple would have another child together, and Clifford would attempt to move on with his life. Finding employment didn't seem to be much of an issue, but keeping a job was. In 2014, he took a company to court for unpaid wages and settled for half of what he was asking for. This is covered in a video by the Skip Tracer, linked in the description. At some point in the last decade, Clifford and his wife divorced. That means this horrible woman gave up her son for absolutely nothing, and I hope she lives with that knowledge every day. Thankfully, we don't have to guess what happened to Clifford in his time since To Catch a Predator, because he whined all about it in this post from July 2020 on a website called the Florida Action Committee. This is a group that intends to inform the media, public, and lawmakers with facts versus myths about the sex offender registry and citizens forced to register. Basically, they want to abolish the sex offender registry in Florida. On a post where a man complains he was entrapped in an underage sting, Clifford shared his own experience. I was entrapped by a sting in 2006 and made an example of. I lost everything after prison. My children, my family, everything I owned was gone. 15 years later, I'm still suffering, no one will hire me, and I feel stuck in this state. Since being released, I've held a few jobs until they found out about my prison stay by the Vigilante group and subsequently fired me. If there was a way to go after the state and all of the moneymakers in the prison sting industry, count me in. He blamed Perverted Justice for contacting each of his employers and getting him fired, leaving him no choice but to flee the state. In 2021, Clifford left Florida, moving 1,000 miles away to small-town New York. There, he's registered as a level 2 RSO and a violent sexual offender. He says he's broke, but at 5'6" and 268 pounds, this dude isn't missing many meals. Plus, he could always just sell his 2013 BMW M5 if times do get lean enough. As of 2023, that's all we know about Clifford Wallach, who learned the hard way what it means to be the most despicable lowlife on a show full of despicable lowlifes. From his dastardly plan to I can't feel my hands.
I can't feel my hands.
From online romancing to blaming Chris Hansen. Here's to Clifford Wallach, just one of To Catch a Predator's many unsung zeros. Any questions?
You want to do it raw?
Raw?
Yes.
What's that?
No rubber.
Fuck you, Clobber.
I love it.